black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the show, the purpose of the Umoja Circle is to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. I also believe that only through dialogue can there be a truly accurate shift in consciousness. And once your consciousness is shifted, then your worldview would also change. Another thing about who I am, I consider myself an educator, not a teacher. I have a definition I would like to put up there. I'm not saying that I'm a teacher. No, I'm not. I've not been trained as a teacher. I have not gone to any school, and I also honor that profession. One of the things that black people have always been somehow we've been miseducated to believe that we were never interested in education. No, that's wrong. When we first got so-called freed by the 13th Amendment in 1865, there was a literacy rate was somewhere around, we were illiterate in the sense of maybe 85% of people of African descent at the time. Now, just saying, when you say illiterate doesn't mean that you're dumb or stupid. Frederick Douglass, one of the greatest orators that we, as people of African descent, has produced in this country, was illiterate when he was a young boy, you know. And as we know from the history of what happened to him when he grew up, when he once learned to read and was educated, most of it autodidacted or self-taught, he became, you saw the brilliance in him. And that's the shame of what this institution that America still has to deal with and still refuses to deal with, enslavement has done. There was a lot of brilliant people in those people that were enslaved, that were kidnapped and brought over here from at least 1619 on. Now, let me make a point that I always tell people. If we start from 1619, that means that everything that happened before was progress, as the old saying go. I think Dr. Henry Clark once said that, one of my great jednas or teachers, is that is a false narrative. The people that came over on those enslaved ships that were kidnapped had ancient histories. The last show that I did, I talked about the slave system that was established by about 8 to 11 European countries, which created the foundation of what we call the capitalist system today. The gold of that time was this, black gold, and those people who came over were important in cultivating the land and producing the products that started the modern, the embryonic function of a capitalist system, you know. But that's another show, another story. But from 1619, 246 years to 1865, and then another 100 years of we had enslavement, okay, unpaid workers, basically, who were brutalized, harmed, and then another 100 years of Jim Crow apartheid. And even though the 13th Amendment so-called freed us, the 14th Amendment so-called, and I keep on saying so-called, made us citizens, and the 15th Amendment so-called made us, give us the right to vote, there's still a lot of people today that don't know what it is. Now, getting back to why I call myself an educator. Now, the word educator comes from combining these letters that make up the modern word, but they come from the Latin. The education comes from the word duce. Okay, the E in front of the D-U-C means out. The D-U-C, which means, the Latin word duce, or duce, means to lead. The A, which means the act of. And the O-R at the end of educator, which means one who does. Therefore, the word educator means one who engages in the act of leading others out of ignorance. And that's what I do in this show. I try to lead others out by talking about events that you might have heard of in your educational journey, miseducational journey, as Carter G. Woodson would put it, that fits the narrative that was established by the same people who enslaved us, that made us look like we were without contact by the European nations. We were living in some kind of dark continent called Africa, or they were giving us this thing called religion so that we could see the light of the glory of their version of Christianity. But one of the things that an educator do, bring you out of darkness. That kind of nonsense leads you into darkness if you go by that. For example, the first Christians were Africans. They're called the Coptics, who were in Egypt, which happened to be a country in northern Africa. Okay, the Coptic religion, which is the oldest form of Christianity. Okay? So why would some people 1,000 or more years later decide that they're going to kidnap you, and the justification for it was to bring you something that you have been dealing with for nearly 2,000 years or 1,500 years prior? That's what I'm talking about. Lead you out of darkness by, again, introducing facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as people of African descent. That is the purpose of the Umoja Circle, okay? What I'm talking about now, this is 2022, and this is an important midterm when it comes to our rights as citizens to vote. And one of the things I want to bring a lot of people out of the darkness and bring to light is the truth of what is a citizen and why we must vote, especially as people of African descent. There's this kind of dialogue that I hear sometimes traveling not only through our community, but through other communities when they're talking about us, is that we don't participate as people of African descent in the vote. Again, that is some wrong information. That is definitely wrong. Or the fact that we were always complacent. If it wasn't for the white person who gave us our freedom with the 13th Amendment or the 14th Amendment, you know, we were just given these rights. And then for 100 years, some bad men in hoods kept on attacking us poor black folks, or some kind of variation of that. No. And when we say, some of us say that we earn the right to vote, you know, that this is something that we struggled with, we fought for. This is not a hyperbole. And this is what I want to talk about this first show, that we literally went to war to maintain our right to vote. And many of us did literally die. The next slide I want to show is what I'm basing my work on. You see two of the books up front. This one, and these, even though these names seem to be a little humorous, they're very serious. This book here is called We Will Shoot Back. And it's about how brothers and sisters in Mississippi, going back to the 1700s, fought. We were not as complacent. We were not as docile as the metaphor, we were taught in when I was coming up. You know, we had to wait for the white sheriff to come in, or the great FBI to come and protect us in rural Mississippi. I have a friend, this book is about some of the Mississippi battles that were going on, and how people leading up to what was going on in the 60s. We did not take crap, okay? Black people did shoot back. I have a friend, one of my best friends, who was from Mississippi, and I've known him for 30 years, and his name is Levi Walls, and he always used to get upset when he would see movies like Mississippi Burning, When there's a movie that came out, I think in the '80s, early '90s, or late '80s, in which they talked about the killing of those three civil rights voters, two white males and one brother, Schwerner, Michael Schwerner. I think the brother's name was Bailey, and Goodman. Okay, they came from the North, students, and they came down to register black men in places like Philadelphia, Mississippi, where they were killed. Okay, and Mississippi Burning is based on that. And it used to bother him. He said, "Man, when I was growing up, he's a 50 baby like me, so he was a kid during these periods of time, but he do remember." As all children remember certain great events. I still remember seeing even though I was in New York, I did see on the news black kids being bowled over by fire hoses. I remember Martin Luther King being put in a jail in Birmingham. I remember the march on from Montgomery, and those types of images are still etched in my childhood memories. And another book that also I want people to familiarize themselves is this book that I'm going to show you here that does talk about the same thing. Here's this sister, this picture. This nonviolent stuff will get you killed. Now, again, it seems humorous, and it came from a quote that literally was told to Dr. Martin Luther King. He was doing a speech, I think it was in either Mississippi again, or Alabama, and it was in this church. But after his speech, an elder black man came up to him and said how he liked his speech and enjoyed the speech, and true to the eldership that we as black people know, spoke some truth to him. He said these words, and the author is just quoting these words, Charles E. Cobb Jr. He said he used now the word stuff was not what he used. It started with an S, and had an H after it. So you can imagine what that word was. This nonviolent will get you killed. Okay, and he told that to the face of Martin Luther King, and that in a sense it was prophetic. This was like in '63 or '62 when this quote was made. But you see that sister on her porch with a shotgun. Black people did not take crap, especially in states like Mississippi, because they knew what they were up against. And again, I'm not like certain brothers who are out there putting stuff on Facebook or Instagram or tweeting without doing research. Okay? When you do research, in the last show I talked about the term epistemology. Epistemology means what is the source of your knowledge? Just because you saw something on Netflix or you saw something on, I know what you're trying to do to learn, but if you just put anything out there, that defeats the purpose of scholarship, okay? And you just add to the muddying of the water and not speaking truth. Again, the purpose of this show is to lead people out of darkness. That's what an educator is. If you're not doing the work, and if you see in front of me, this is what you need to be doing. This is the source of your knowledge. When I say things on this show, it's not because I just picked it up on Google, or I picked it up, on some lecture that, with somebody that agrees with what I'm saying. I have to do the research. The thing that you get from the Umoja Circle has been research, and I've been doing this thing almost 25 years, or a little bit over 25 years. And that's what I want to talk about when it comes to the vote, that there's a reason that we should be voting as black people, because we earned it. We shot back, okay? We understood that nonviolence of the 60s, will get you killed. And it did get brother Martin Luther King killed, because the people who are fighting against the gains of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and you must understand that was just one of 4 or 5 that came before it. So that was not the only civil rights acts that we've had or the government has put forth. It goes back to like the 1870s or late 1860s, 1866, I think. There was the first Civil Rights Act was published, and there was 4 or 5 more going through into the 1900s, into the late 1800s. But what happened? We have the same people who are in power today called Republicans. Right now, it doesn't matter whether they were Republicans or 100 years ago they were called Democrats. You know, there was a switch when do you know that Ronald Reagan, the great Republican hero, he was a Democrat, you know, in the 60s. You know, McDonald, you know, who is the leader of the Republican in the Senate, he was a Democrat in the late 60s. But after Goldwater was crushed by America because the John Birch Society and a lot of the Southern Democrats backed him, a lot of Americans did not want to have to deal with that, didn't deal with that, and Johnson became president. If Goldwater had become president and those white supremacist ideals that are still in the paper today, okay, one thing about these white supremacists, doesn't matter whether they consider themselves Democrats during the Civil War or after Goldwater in 1964 presidential campaign, a lot of the Democrats jumped into the Republican Party. And then the Republican Party in 1968 under Nixon did things where they just ignored the black vote. It's called the Southern strategy. Okay, so there's a reason. If you don't understand that in these books, then you will be given BS, you know, by that and confusion. Again, and you go deeper into darkness instead of out of darkness. Okay, and again, we fought for every step of the way to maintain. I got a definition of politics, I think, as the next slide. I want to understand this. It's Mao Zedong, if you're not familiar with him, he was the head of China after World War II, okay, in the Communist Party. But he had a statement that a lot of people have been quoting since, and since he said that politics is war without bloodshed, while war is politics with bloodshed. You know what that means? That you are at war, perpetually at war from 1787 when the Constitution was ratified. They made that document in the form of that system that was created by that document. It was designed politically to be fought as a war, but without bloodshed and in a controlled environment called the Congress. It still devastates communities by the decisions that were made. It still caused deaths, Medgar Evers, Martin Luther King, by decisions that were made because of passing of the 64 Civil Rights Act, or Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 that said segregation is okay, separate but equal is okay, or Brown versus the Board of Education. All those battles were fought politically as a war. Strategies were made. And this system, as long as you have an American government the way it is set up, it's always going to be fought as a war, and wars are messy. Wars are messy, and you got to understand that. So democracy is messy. So those of you who are turned off by what you're seeing, I don't know, maybe there's a reason they got rid of the civics class. When I was growing up, you had civics. You understood how the government works, all right? You were conditioned to understand that there's three equal branches, but they're not really equal. The most powerful branch of the three, to me, is the congressional branch, because that's where the laws are formed. That's where the budgets are made, and this is an economic system, and that budget is what makes this system grow. The economy, economics, and economics run politics. And if you can keep a people or the most vulnerable out of the economic mainstream, then you can control. They have no political power. And black people understood that from day one, because they, for 246 years, were working in areas that were owned by plantation owners or rich shipbuilders. They were in those households. They saw what economic. They listened to what was being said at the dinner table when they were just part of the furniture sitting around waiting to serve them. This is something that we are not taught. That we need to understand that the history of the political machine that runs this system is a war and has been a war, and black people were at the front lines fighting it. So when you hear somebody today like me say, we earned our right as citizens to vote, we fought for that right, literally fought. And if you, again, I just don't talk hyperbole. If you want to look at another slide I want to show you. Okay, many of you, again, even though you might have been well-educated and gone to all the great colleges and universities, how many of you heard of the Battle of Liberty Place or the Battle of Canal Street? That Canal Street might sound familiar. Yeah, Canal Street was in New Orleans. There was a big battle in which black people in 1866, I think, no, the Battle of Liberty Place was in 1874, excuse me. And that was when mob, well, you think what happened in January 6th was terrible. That's nothing new. There was a mob of 5,000 ex-Confederates and Confederate sympathizers and white supremacists who came down on the courthouse in Liberty Place or off Canal Street in 1874, and there were the state militias of black soldiers and black men who fought them off, 3,000 against 5,000. Okay, and one of the things about the state militia. The state militia was run by a gentleman, some of you Civil War buffs might know. His name was James Longstreet. Longstreet was a Confederate officer in the Army of Northern Virginia, which was Lee's army. He was Lee's right-hand man, but when the South lost the war, and a lot of those Confederate soldiers who attacked that courthouse in 1874 didn't want to accept it, just like some people today don't want to accept the results of the 2020 election. Same mentality that still exists again today. He was hired as a general of the state militia, and in fact he was in control of those black troops, and he fought alongside them. Okay, he was ostracized by the South, and if you talk to anybody who was a lost cause believer, you know, Longstreet was vilified. But again, we've had white allies, okay, who fought alongside us. And if this critical race theory nonsense they're talking about, the reason they want to bring up is because here's the books that they don't want you to read. They don't want you to understand the struggles, because it makes America don't look like the land of the free that we were taught. That's the mythology. That's what white America want us to be convinced. There's an old saying, if you want to keep something from, they used to use the N-word, but a black person, put it in a book. Put it in a book. They want you to go to Google, and you got to limit it, even though you think you're getting knowledge, it's still being controlled. It's still being cultivated to give you limited knowledge if you don't understand the epistemology or the source of what you're talking about. Black people earned it with their bodies. I want to show another slide to prove that. This is the one I thought about first. This is the battle that happened 10 years before that, in 1866. This is the battle that again, in New Orleans. Now, there were battles all over the place, but in New Orleans, where 200 of black folks were massacred because they were protesting they had the audacity to protest to make sure that they got their voting rights. 1866, okay? We just got freed. The voting rights, I think, came out in in 1868. You know, and then you got the 14th Amendment made us a citizen. Then we had to deal with the voting rights of the 15th Amendment. But just for the fact that now that we're free, we want to make sure that we got the right to vote. And why did we want to get the right to vote? What's the next slide? Look at all those little dots. You see the legend on the side? You got dark brown and little down to tan. Well, those are the amount of death that was in every last one of those dots was where white supremacists attacked black people. So for the minimum of voting or having the right to act, and this is just in a 10-year period. This is not the 100 years until 1965. This is in 1865 to 1876, with all these attacks on black people because we wanted to live up to the rights of our rights to vote. Look at them. And those red dots, that's where you had more than 200 deaths. You think Black Wall Street was a rare few? You know, or Rosewood? Those are the 1900s. Yes, we earned our right to vote, folks. Our black brothers and sisters fought to do that. And all those shots, we didn't just be complacent, we fought back. It was battles. We shot back. Okay, we earned our right as citizens. There's one thing, and you want to know why? Before we end this session, there's a image of all see all those men. There were 17 black men, 2 senators, 2 from Mississippi, Howard Revels, and I forgot the other brother's name, and there were 15 others in the Congress. Okay, many of the Reconstruction Acts that liberated black folks, that brought public education to white kids, were done by black folks. And anybody tell you that we weren't in Congress? We were there from the beginning. We participated in the American dream. We earned our right. Those black men, you dishonor them when you don't even know that they existed. The first person I was told when I was young, I was told the first senator or congressman was Ralph Bunche in the 1950s. Nothing was mentioned of those 17 men. 2,000 brothers and sisters were in public office by the 1870s. All the time being attacked by the Ku Klux Klan or white supremacists, the same kind of mentality that's being done by those who are now part of the white supremacist Republican Party. Understand your history, folks. I'm going to continue with this on the next show to understand why we need to understand who we are, why we need to vote. War is perpetual. The political system is a perpetual war without bloodshed. But there was bloodshed when we fought back. We did shoot back. So until next time, peace, Hotep, bye-bye, to the honors of our ancestors. Later.